stop visiting my office without permission." Her voice slammed against me like thunder. My daughter Emily, standing at the entrance to my study, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes sharp with authority I hadn't expected. She was barely in her 30s, but she carried herself as if she owned the place, as if every corner of my life was now subject to her will. I paused, feeling a strange mix of disbelief and quiet hurt. My office, a space I had built with decades of hard work, late nights, and sacrifices, had been transformed into a battleground in an instant. The sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting long reflections across the polished floor. My short gray hair, neatly styled, caught the light, and the faint lines on my clean-shaven face hinted at years of endurance and careful patience. My slightly fuller build gave me a solid presence, grounding the room in calm authority. I didn't move immediately. I didn't raise my voice. I simply observed her, letting the intensity of her anger and frustration hang in the air, knowing that impatience always betrays itself eventually. Emily's voice rose, sharp and commanding, echoing in the hallway. "I'm serious. You can't just come in whenever you feel like it. I have my own schedule, my own clients, my own life. This is my space now, not yours." Her words reverberated off the walls, and even the office plants seemed to lean back slightly, as if recoiling from the tension. The administrative staff paused mid-typing, glances darting between us. My daughter believed she had won simply by raising her voice, asserting control, claiming authority. I remained still, letting her fury pass around me like wind through a tree. My eyes were calm, warm, gentle, betraying no anger, only quiet reflection. Every gesture, every step she took, was observed, catalogued, understood. She assumed control, but she didn't know that every action has consequences. And arrogance often sows the seeds of its own reckoning. She stepped closer, leaning slightly over my desk, her voice dropping just enough to be severe, but almost trembling with frustration. "I've told you before, Dad, if you don't respect my space, I'll have to take action. I can't keep letting this happen. I need boundaries." Her words were precise, rehearsed perhaps, but even precision cannot mask the tension that rises when someone overreaches. I took a measured breath, my chest rising slowly. "Emily, I understand your position, but understand mine as well." My tone was soft, deliberate, carrying the weight of experience. This office, this home, this life, it isn't just about schedules or rules. It's about respect, about understanding limits, about remembering that patience and preparation always outweigh haste and arrogance. Her eyes narrowed, disbelief flickering across her face. "Limits? You think you set the limits? This isn't your space anymore. I run things here." She gestured sharply at the office around her, her movement emphasizing the territory she believed was hers. But I noticed the tiny hesitation in her posture, the faint uncertainty hidden beneath the veneer of confidence. Even when we think we dominate, cracks appear in the armor of arrogance. I allowed the silence to stretch, letting her feel the weight of my presence. Every second she spent asserting dominance, I remained calm, steady, deliberate. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I simply existed in that room as a reminder that patience, foresight, and quiet authority carry power that shouting cannot replicate. Later that evening, I began making calls, quietly but with precision. Arrangements had to be made. Legal notifications, property enforcement, and professional coordination were quietly set in motion. Not as retaliation born from anger, but as inevitable consequences delivered with calm authority. The foundation had been prepared long before her outburst. All that remained was the perfect moment to apply it. The night passed quietly. Emily, unaware, slept confident in her control, believing that the boundaries she had imposed were unassailable. She didn't realize that authority built solely on anger and assertiveness is fragile, and that preparation coupled with patience is far stronger than any outburst. Morning came. The sunlight filtered gently into the house, warm, soft, illuminating the room she had once considered entirely her own. She woke to confusion. Keys deactivated. Notices displayed prominently. The reality of consequences had arrived silently, swiftly, and decisively. The control she had thought absolute was gone. The arrogance she had relied upon had no foundation against preparation and moral authority. Her expression changed rapidly. From surprise to panic, her body rigid. The staff, who had been carefully briefed, moved quietly but with certainty, reinforcing the authority she had sought to challenge. Emily's confidence faltered as she read the notices. Realizing that the rules she had attempted to enforce were no longer hers to dictate, I entered the room calmly. My short gray hair neat, my warm eyes gentle but unwavering. My slightly fuller build exuding steady authority. I didn't shout. I didn't scold. I didn't gloat. I only watched, letting her recognize the lesson in silence. Respect cannot be demanded. Control cannot be seized through anger. And entitlement without foresight leads only to disruption. By mid-morning, the consequences were undeniable. She had assumed authority where it was not hers, disregarded boundaries, and failed to recognize the patience and preparation of experience. She now understood, fully and irrevocably, that power without respect is fleeting, and lessons enforced with calm certainty are unforgettable. Emily's shoulders slumped. Her voice, once sharp and demanding, faltered. She realized finally that true authority does not come from shouting or force. It comes from foresight, patience, and moral strength. And sometimes, the quietest actions deliver the heaviest lessons. That morning, she learned a truth that would stay with her for life. The strongest authority is invisible, inevitable, and delivered without theatrics. By mid-morning, the house had a quiet tension that almost felt like a living presence. Emily moved through the rooms like a shadow, her steps measured, deliberate, yet laced with unease. The keycards that once allowed her free access now refused entry. The notices displayed on the walls were firm and undeniable. Each one was written with precision, carefully detailing authority, rules, and boundaries that she had ignored the day before. She had demanded control, attempted to assert dominance, and now, within the span of hours, her certainty was collapsing. I observed her from the living room doorway, standing with calm authority. My short gray hair reflected the soft sunlight streaming through the tall windows. My clean-shaven face, lined with light wrinkles, showed no anger, only quiet patience. My slightly fuller build anchored me in the space, a visual reminder that authority does not require shouting. My warm, gentle eyes met hers briefly, and though I said nothing, the weight of decades of experience spoke louder than any words could. Emily tried to act composed. She straightened her posture, squared her shoulders, and moved with purpose, yet each gesture betrayed hesitation. Her confident tone faltered as she spoke to the house staff, who now operated under instructions she had not anticipated. She issued commands that were politely ignored, redirections that were met with calm compliance rather than fear. The invisible structure I had built was asserting itself quietly, leaving her no option but to acknowledge it. She approached the notices again, reading every line with growing disbelief. Her lips parted in disbelief, then tightened, and her hand shook slightly as she traced the edges of the paper. It wasn't just the legal authority or the formal boundaries that unsettled her, it was the inevitability. The precision. The fact that no anger had been displayed, no shouting, no grand spectacle. The lesson was delivered with calm certainty. And certainty has a weight heavier than rage. The morning sun shifted, illuminating the house in soft golden light, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. The staff moved quietly, professionally, ensuring that the rules were observed. Emily realized she could not circumvent them, could not push back with words or anger. Each attempt to assert control only highlighted her diminished authority. The realization was slow, creeping in from the edges of her confidence. Infiltrating the arrogance she had carried like armor, I moved quietly through the rooms, observing her, letting her see me without approaching too closely. The gentle sway of my movements, the calm steadiness of my presence, contrasted sharply with her frantic energy. My warm eyes were steady, patient, unyielding. Every action she took in defiance only emphasized the quiet power I had maintained, the authority she had underestimated. Emily stopped in the kitchen, staring at a notice placed prominently on the counter. Her voice trembled slightly as she muttered, I didn't think." She trailed off, unsure how to continue. That was when she realized the full weight of her misjudgment. Authority is not claimed with shouting, not enforced with anger. Authority is measured, deliberate, and backed by preparation. And she was now facing the full consequence of ignoring those principles. I watched her shoulders slump, the tension in her jaw soften, the stubborn set of her eyes giving way to quiet acceptance. She understood finally that her arrogance had blinded her, that entitlement has limits, and that force alone is never enough. She had assumed control, tried to dictate terms, and yet she was now subject to rules she had failed to respect. The house, my life, the space she had thought she could dominate, it had quietly slipped beyond her command. Even Emily's expressions of frustration gradually shifted into uncertainty and reflection. She moved slowly, carefully, realizing that each step, each action, must now acknowledge the boundaries she had ignored. She whispered apologies under her breath, muttered words of contrition, yet the lesson had already been delivered. The subtle, deliberate orchestration of consequences had left no room for denial. By late morning, a profound shift had occurred. The house, which had seemed ordinary on the surface, now carried an undercurrent of authority, structure, and moral clarity. Emily had been humbled, not by confrontation, not by yelling, but by inevitability, patience, and foresight. The consequences she faced were undeniable, and the lesson would remain with her for a lifetime. Arrogance unchecked leads to loss, and preparation always overcomes impulsiveness. I remained calm, moving slowly through the spaces she had once controlled. My warm, gentle eyes reflected not anger, but quiet satisfaction, a reminder that authority rooted in patience and moral strength is never challenged without consequence. Emily looked at me finally, shoulders slumped, a mixture of disbelief, regret, and newfound understanding in her gaze. She had learned a truth that day: sometimes silence carries the loudest message. And lessons delivered with inevitability are the ones most deeply remembered. By early afternoon, Emily had stopped pacing. She sank onto the living room couch, staring at the keycards and notices spread before her. Her earlier defiance, once bold and sharp, had dissolved into hesitation and confusion. The staff moved quietly around her, carrying out their tasks with precision and calm, following instructions she had not anticipated. Every movement reminded her that she no longer held control in a house she had once assumed belonged to her. I entered the room slowly, my short gray hair catching the soft light from the windows. Clean-shaven face composed, slightly fuller build steady. My warm, gentle eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw the quiet authority I carried without effort. There was no shouting, no anger, no theatrics, just presence. And yet that presence carried a weight far heavier than any raised voice could. The house itself seemed to reflect the shift in power. Where she had expected compliance, she found firm boundaries quietly enforced. Emily opened her mouth to speak, but the words faltered. I didn't realize." Her voice trailed, uncertain, trembling slightly. I only shook my head gently, letting silence speak. Lessons delivered with calm precision resonate deeper than any argument. She felt the inevitability of her own choices pressing in. Every action she had taken to assert dominance, every word of entitlement, had led her to this quiet confrontation with reality. The sunlight angled through the windows, casting warm, golden light across the polished floors, and illuminating the subtle tension in the room. Emily's eyes darted to the notices again, scanning the clear statements of authority, boundaries, and consequences. Her confidence wavered, replaced by the dawning understanding that she had overstepped. Underestimated patience and misjudged authority. I walked slowly toward the desk. My movements deliberate, steady, composed. The slight sound of my shoes on the hardwood echoed softly, a reminder that presence alone can command attention. Emily flinched at the subtle shift, realizing that this was no longer about argument, it was about inevitable accountability. She had assumed control through shouting and insistence, but control built on arrogance is fragile. The house, the space, and the rules had quietly but firmly been reclaimed. By mid-afternoon, the lesson had fully begun to take hold. Emily's posture softened, her shoulders sagging, her hands resting in her lap. She whispered, almost to herself, I didn't see it before." Her eyes met mine, searching for acknowledgement, and I offered a gentle nod. Not condemnation, not triumph. Just the quiet authority of experience, patience, and moral strength. The house felt different now. Even though everything appeared normal, the air carried a new weight of respect, understanding, and realization. Emily had learned that authority cannot be demanded with loud words, nor can control be seized by defiance alone. It must be earned, observed, and respected. And when ignored, consequences arrive quietly but undeniably. By the time the afternoon waned, Emily sat in silent reflection, the lesson sinking in fully. She now understood that patience and preparation, combined with moral authority, are far more powerful than force or entitlement. And she would not forget. Evening settled over the house, casting long warm shadows across the rooms. Emily sat quietly on the couch, shoulders slumped, hands clasped together. The earlier storm of anger, defiance, and arrogance had vanished, replaced by a heavy, thoughtful silence. She understood now fully that the boundaries she had tried to ignore were not arbitrary, they were deliberate. Carefully prepared and impossible to dismiss, I walked into the room. My short gray hair neat, clean-shaven face calm. Slightly fuller build steady and reassuring. My warm, gentle eyes met hers, and in that moment, no words were necessary. She knew the lesson had been delivered, not with shouting, not with punishment, but with inevitability. Every decision, every quiet action, had demonstrated that authority built on preparation and patience cannot be ignored. Emily's lips parted as she tried to speak, but the words faltered. I understand now," she whispered, voice small, uncertain. She had finally grasped the depth of her misjudgment. She had believed her boldness, her insistence, her force of will could impose control. But she had underestimated the quiet strength of experience, patience, and moral clarity. I nodded gently, letting her feel the weight of the realization. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about understanding, accountability, respect. The house, the space, and the life I had built were not hers to seize through impatience or entitlement. And in that understanding, Emily found not just a lesson, but a chance to grow, to reflect, and to rebuild trust. The staff moved quietly around her, carrying out their duties with precision, reinforcing the authority she had once dismissed. Each movement, each subtle gesture, reminded her that control without respect is fleeting, and that those who attempt to dominate without understanding the foundation beneath them often face consequences they cannot ignore. I stepped closer, my presence steady, calm, unshakable. My warm eyes conveyed patience, not anger, understanding, not triumph. Emily's gaze dropped to the floor, and for the first time, she saw the reality of her actions, the arrogance, the disregard, and the assumptions that had led her to this humbling point. By nightfall, the lesson had fully settled. Emily had learned the quiet power of preparation, the weight of moral authority, and the importance of respecting boundaries. She understood now that lessons are often delivered not with loud words, but with inevitability, with careful, deliberate action that leaves no room for denial. As I moved to the window, looking out at the fading light, I reflected quietly. Sometimes, the strongest victories are those achieved without confrontation. Sometimes, silence and patience speak louder than anger and shouting ever could. Emily had learned, not through force, but through the subtle, undeniable weight of consequences. And in that moment, a calm satisfaction filled me, not in revenge, not in triumph over a child, but in the quiet, unwavering authority of experience, the restoration of respect, and the assurance that lessons delivered thoughtfully leave a mark far deeper than any moment of anger. Sometimes, the loudest words are unnecessary. And sometimes, the quietest actions break through arrogance and restore balance where it was long forgotten.